proper philosophical attitude. That is to say, what if that which appears as an inconsistency, as the failure to draw all the consequences from one's ethical attitude, what if this is, on the contrary, the positive condition of possibility of ethics? What if such an exclusion of some form of otherness from the scope of our ethical concerns is co-substantial with the very founding gesture of ethical universality, so that the more universal our ethics is, the more brutal the underlying exclusion is? What the Christian all-inclusive attitude, St. Paul's famous, "There are no men or women, no Jew or Greeks for me," what this attitude involves is a radical exclusion of those who do not accept inclusion into the Christian community. In other particularistic religions, even in Islam, there is a place for others. They are tolerated even if they are looked upon with condescension. The Christian motto, "All men are brothers," however, also means that those who do not accept to be my brothers are not men. In the early years of the Iranian Revolution, Khomeini played on the same paradox when he claimed, I remember it plastically even now, in an interview for the Western press, that the Iranian Revolution is the most human in the entire history. Not one person was killed, he claimed, in the Iranian Revolution. When the surprised journalist asked him about the death penalties publicized in the very Iranian media, Khomeini calmly replied, "Those that we killed were not men but criminal dogs." I think this logic is somehow implied by every ethical universalism. So what then does ethical universality exclude? Which dimension? There is a wonderful passage in Marcel Proust's Recherche, In Search of the Lost Time, in which Marcel, the figure in the novel, uses phone for the first time, speaking to his grandmother. Her voice, heard alone, apart from her body, surprises Marcel. It is a voice of a frail old woman, not the gentle voice of the grandmother he remembers. And the point is that this experience then colors his entire perception of the grandmother. When later he visits her in person, he perceives her in a new way, as a strange, mad old woman drowsing over her book, overburdened with age, flushed, coarse, vulgar, no longer the charming, caring grandmother he remembered. This is how voice as autonomous partial object can affect our entire perception of the body to which it belongs. The lesson of this is that precisely the direct experience of the unity of a person, where voice seems to fit its organic whole, involves a necessary mystification. In order to penetrate to the truth of the person, one has to tear this unity apart, to focus on one of its aspects in its isolation, and then to allow this element to color our entire perception. This is what Freud, I think, meant when he opposed hermeneutics, when he wrote that one should interpret en détail, not en masse. To locate every feature of a human being into the totality of the person is to miss not only the meaning of this detail, but the true meaning of the whole itself. This is a very radical lesson of psychoanalysis, I think, that if I want really to understand you, no, I shouldn't see you as a whole person. I should do something like what Marcel experiences there. Isolate one feature, where when I isolate this feature, I see the vulgarity, the whatever, and then let this feature color all of it. And to put it in, back to Lacanian terms, or even theological terms, in this way I pass from neighbor in the simple sense of semblant, of one who is like me, to the neighbor in this more radical dimension. This would be maybe, for psychoanalysis, the expression of a neighbor. There is someone whom you think you know him or her perfectly, person with whom you spend decades and so on. But doesn't it often happen that at a certain point this person does something, you catch an evil gaze, a nervous gesture, some vulgarity, unexpected brutality, and all of a sudden you ask yourself, my God, is this really the person that I knew? At that point, you encounter the neighbor. So when Freud and Lacan insist on the problematic nature of the Judeo-Christian injunction to love your neighbor, they refer precisely to the dark, impenetrable abyss which is a neighbor. Beneath the neighbor, as my mirror image, the one who is like me, with whom I can empathize, there always lurks the unfathomable abyss of radical otherness, of someone about whom I ultimately do not know anything. Can I really know who he is? How can I be sure that his words are not a mere pretense? This is why Lacan applies to the neighbor the term thing, das Ding, used by Freud to designate the ultimate object of our desires in its intensity and impenetrability. One should hear in this term all the connotations of horror fiction. The neighbor is the evil thing which potentially lurks beneath every homely human face. Just think about Stephen King's Shining, in which the father, a modest failed writer, gradually turns into a killing beast who, with an evil grin, goes on to slaughter his entire family. This is a neighbor. Since a neighbor is primarily a thing, a traumatic intruder, someone whose different way of life, or rather, way of enjoyment, disturbs us, throws the balance of our way of life, off the rails. When the neighbor comes too close, this can also give rise to an aggressive reaction aimed at getting rid of this disturbing intruder. As Peter Sloterdijk, with whom politically I disagree, but from time to time he says something penetrating, as Sloterdijk put it, more communication means at first, above all, more conflict. This is why, that's another problem that I have with this. We should hear everybody's his or their story from within and so on. This is why I think this is a typical superego injunction. No, you should understand everybody. It's not possible. So then you feel guilty. You are never up to the level. No, I think that, how should I put it very brutally, but I think this is the honest position. I don't want to understand everybody. I don't care about majority of the people. I think what we need today, when we are different cultures violently thrown together, I think we need, as Sloterdijk put it, a new code of discretion. We need more alienation. We need to learn to ignore each other. I don't think we need more to understand each other. This is, again, an impossible task, which makes us forever guilty. But did you really understand? How did you know what I meant with that smile and so on? This is typical liberal blackmail, which we should reject. Perhaps the best way to describe the status of this, the status of this neighbor would have been, and this is, I think, there you see clearly politically the limit of this. Let's understand the neighbor would be the deadlock of that truth and reconciliation procedure in South Africa. Of course, I sympathize with it. But again, it has its limits. You know, the wager was very honorable, human one. Instead of engaging in revenge and so on, why don't we just offer to all apartheid torturers the chance of confronting their victims, openly describing what they did, and in this way we guarantee them, if they come and confess, they will be pardoned. The catch is that this procedure implies, or rather only works when we can count, how should I put it, on a minimal ethical responsibility and dignity of the torturer. What happens is what, according to my sources, did happen, at least a couple of times, that you got an apartheid murderer, torturer, who came there, confronted his black victims, and with a cynical smile said, yes, don't you remember, I tortured you in this way, in that way, I confess everything, okay, haha, now I'm over. And he perfectly followed the rules. The problem was that this implication was not met, which is why, based on this, because the motto there in South Africa was, we forgive, we don't we forgive you, but we will not forget it. I think this is a very limited motto. I'm opposed to it. It's a fake. First, again, it has limits. It works only at a certain level. Would you be ready to say this for Hitler or Stalin? We forgive you, dear Hitler. Tell us the story of Holocaust. We will not forget it, but we forgive. No, I think that when we are dealing with really radical crimes, I'm almost tempted to propose the opposite motto. I am ready to forget it, but I will never forgive you. This is, I was told in Korea, South Korea, how